Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Especially good morning to our local business owners and managers and to others who are interested in building the resilience of our businesses to survive and thrive despite a possible disaster. I am Mary Lou Souter, Chair of the Rancho Mirage Emergency Preparedness Commission. We recognize that our businesses are the lifeblood of our community, and we welcome you. It's my pleasure to introduce our workshop presenter today, Ines Pearce. Ines is the CEO of Pearce Global Partners, Incorporated. She is a senior advisor to the Dr. Lucy Jones Center for Science and Society. In addition, she is president of the Disaster Resistant Business Toolkit Workgroup. Today's workshop is presented by the Earthquake Country Alliance and supported by the Rancho Mirage Chamber of Commerce. Please join me as we welcome Ines Pearce with 7 steps to an earthquake resilient workplace and other disasters. Ines.
Thank you, Mary Lou, and thank you everyone for being here. It's a great day in that we don't have a storm about us right now, but we are going to talk today about resilience and what that means for businesses. And if there's anyone out there also that represents nonprofits, this also applies to nonprofits. So anytime I mention business, just know that I'm also referring to nonprofits as well. It's any organization. So we're going to cover a lot of ground, but the purpose here is to make this as simple as possible. Even though we will talk about all hazards, most of the examples I'm going to give today are related to earthquakes, hence the Earthquake Country Alliance sponsorship, because that's their focus. But really, when you prepare for an earthquake, you're preparing for basically all the other kind of disasters that you might experience. Some of the specifics about what you do during an earthquake are going to be the only difference. But with that, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them into the chat. And we'll definitely get to the questions at the end, and we'll keep things moving along. Again, I'm going to provide information, I'm going to provide resources, because I want you to leave here with all the ideas of what you can do next and where to go, either for asking questions, more information, or just things you want to take action on. Can you hear me okay? All right. Earthquakes are a very real threat. And it's something that no matter where you live in this world, there is susceptibility. But specifically in the area that we live in, we are on the border of the Ring of Fire. And we know that that it's a daily occurrence for us, and that we have a regular experience of earthquakes, maybe not felt. We do have a lot of people who move to California who haven't been through earthquakes before, but we know it's something that's a part of our regular lives. In particular, in Southern California, we are aware of the San Andreas Fault, which is our biggest threat as far as earthquakes are concerned. And it's because the length of the fault can produce a large earthquake. The length of the fault actually has a lot to say about the size of the earthquake. Smaller faults don't produce as large an earthquake as, for instance, the San Andreas. But the one thing to know about the San Andreas is that there's compression happening on the San Andreas. That's why there's this big bend in there. We've got one side of the tectonic plate moving one direction, moving north, and the other side moving south. And what's happening is they're getting stuck and they're compressing, and that's causing extra pressure. That's what makes the Southern California part of the San Andreas a little bit more of a concern. We know that we have over 300 active faults in Southern California. It's a lot. You know, most people only know about a couple, maybe only the San Andreas, but we do have a lot. And each of these can have larger than a magnitude 6, which we know magnitude 6 can produce a lot of shaking and can produce a lot of damage. And this is not to scare you. This is just to say, okay, this is information, and why we talk so much about earthquakes is because we know they can happen at any point. If you're in an area that you're not familiar, maybe you're new to it, or maybe you never even thought about looking at it, there's a resource with CalOES, which is the California Office of Emergency Services. They have this My Hazards page. you can go to this website that you see down at the bottom, type in your address, and find out about your hazards: earthquake, flood, fire, tsunami. Obviously, tsunami not for Coachella Valley, but anyway, you can look at any of these things and find out what your susceptibility is for multiple hazards. Good information to have, especially for business planning. You really want to have a good understanding of your hazards, because that will help you as you start putting your working plan together and actually assembling all the resources. We have over 30 earthquakes every day. Most of them aren't felt because they're too small, but we do have them on a regular basis. Again, it just keeps it in the back of our minds that we do live in earthquake country. I'm going to skip this video. Oh, actually, there it's going to play. So the reason why we talk about earthquakes so much as far as the science of it is that we've learned a lot. And here you can see the San Andreas and what they have learned along the way. And part of science is finding out every time there's an earthquake, and then modeling and doing excavation to find out where these faults are. And the more information helps us to understand how the shaking occurs, which helps us in the planning side, but also just to better understand the information so that we can incorporate that into our plans. So certain areas are going to be higher susceptibility or more likely to have shaking than others. But also overall, as a state, if you're a business organization, you may be centered in one part of the state, but you may have operations in other parts, or you may use transportation systems. So we're not limited to what's in our four walls. We have to cross areas. And that's why it's important to know what's outside of your business as well, as far as what's in the community, because that also can have impacts on you and can close you or have other things that can cause disruptions. So with use of these supercomputers and our science experts and all the research that's being done, this USERF map was really looking at the whole state as far as our likelihood of significant shaking. And you'll see here, the one that's actually the highest on the list is the southern San Andreas, not all of the San Andreas, but specifically the southern San Andreas, because it's been well over 300 years since it last shook. And this pressure that's building has the ability to cause earthquakes. So we know the potential is there. So it's not, again, not to scare people. That's not the point. It's to say, we know that this is a threat, and that's something that we need to plan for. And when you see something in here that says the probability of shaking within 30 years, I want you to know that doesn't mean it's a ticking clock of 30 years. It's going to happen in 30 years. It's just the likelihood. It's percentages. So I don't want you to think 30 years and it's going to happen in 30 years. It may not. It could happen at any point. But the thing is that they're just trying to put some statistics to it to help us to understand that which one's more likely to happen when. So with that, many of you probably have heard of the Shakeout. Hopefully you all participated last week in the Great Shakeout. And this was taking on the southern San Andreas a possible big one that might occur. And again, the longer the fault, the more shaking, the larger the earthquake. And it was looking at the San Andreas, which that part hasn't, as I said, shook in quite some time, and modeled a 7.8 magnitude earthquake, 180-mile rupture, and then all the things that would happen with that. These are really important things for businesses and organizations to use scenarios like this to help with your planning. Sometimes it's just really hard to think, in addition to everything else you're doing on a daily basis, okay, earthquake happens without some frame of reference. And these scenarios can really help with, okay, if this happens, we have 100 seconds of fault rupture, we have a lot of shaking, I'm in my building, what can I expect? And then from that can actually help inform your planning. So this effort had over 300 scientists working on it, and subject matter experts and everyone, to create a scenario. If you haven't seen it, it's really great, can help with your planning. But this is what's behind the Shakeout and why Shakeout has been going for more than 13 years, to get people to practice the right things to do. In particular, if you look at that Northridge earthquake, which was a significant event in Southern California, is very limited in size compared to what you saw was the Southern San Andreas or the Shakeout scenario shaking, which would impact the whole region in a much wider area more significantly. Again, longer fault, more shaking, shorter fault, significant shaking still in Northridge, but not as widespread. So when you look at the scenario equation, this is what they came up with, is that based on the shaking, based on the area that was impacted, there were 300 buildings significantly damaged. And significantly damaged for a business is that you cannot continue to operate in that building. It may even be a modern building, but you may have different types of damage within the structure that would keep you from being able, not that it's going to collapse, not 300,000 collapses, but it's more that there's a disruption to the operation in your building. And that becomes really important. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. But also there was some other infrastructure damage, which can be very significant to businesses. Fires were another problem, and we know that's something we deal with here in California on a regular basis. But these other disruptions, as far as people being injured, the number of deaths was significant, and also just having people that are displaced. They don't have somewhere either to live or go. These are all things that we look at a community can be impacts, but as businesses can also be impacts as far as impacts to your employees, your workforce, and your customers. So why do businesses actually fail in the aftermath of disasters? This is long-term research that looked, actually one of the significant ones was after the Northridge earthquake. And here's some of the things to know. And this is some of the things that since the pandemic, people are starting to pay a lot more attention to some of these items, because systems have been strained, businesses have been strained, organizations have been strained, and some have gone out. As of January, there were 400,000 small businesses that had closed based on the pandemic, or potentially some of these factors that actually made them more vulnerable once the pandemic occurred. And here's some just to get you thinking. So the businesses may fail because of the adverse impact on customers. It may be that they've had significant disruption. They no longer need the goods or services, whatever it might be. So something's happened to the customers. It's not even about the business. Also, it could be losses to property. It could be a particular product that's damaged, or that you can't get your product to the customers. That can also be a significant issue. If a business wasn't in good financial shape before something happened, definitely is going to be a factor in whether or not they survive and thrive, as Mary Lou mentioned. And also the failure to understand the post-disaster environment. What I will tell you is no two disasters are the same, even if they're both earthquakes. Something significant will change in your business environment, will change in the community, and you have to be flexible, adaptable, and resilient in order to bounce back. So the main thing is, if you don't understand what the changes are, or you're rigid that it must be a certain way that you operate, it's going to make it much harder for you to survive and thrive. So you want to be able to work within this new environment, whatever it is that's changed, whether your customer base has left, whether you have to relocate, whatever it might be, being flexible, being adaptable will help you to survive and thrive. So when it comes to disasters of any kind, and again, a lot of these examples I'm going to show are earthquake related, we have direct impacts. It's obvious. Physical damage, that's direct. The indirects are a little bit harder to explain just because it's something outside of your four walls. It could be infrastructure, it could be systems. How do you get to work? How do you deliver your products? Something that impacts you, whether it's power, water, whatever the issues might be. Indirects are a little bit harder to put your hands around, but that's why we talk about these scenarios, so you understand some of the implications and how they might impact you. So when we talk about disasters happening, everyone talks about recovery. We've been talking about the pandemic and recovery. When does the recovery really start? It all starts before a disaster ever occurs. And the reason why is whatever you're going to do before a disaster is definitely going to make a difference on how well, how fast, and how quickly you recover. If you do nothing, it's like having a party. If you were to have a party or plan on having a party, but you didn't do anything until your first guest showed up, you're going to be scrambling around, you're going to be rushing, you're going to be making decisions based on very limited information, and you're probably not going to make really great decisions, and the party's not going to be all that great. It's the same with any sort of a disaster. You want to do your pre-planning, you want to plan in advance, you want to get people trained, you want to get all the information in advance. Everything happens before. And it's really important because that will have impacts on how you will recover. So whether it's planning, the coordination, mitigation, which is what you do in advance to lessen your impacts, evacuating if that's something that you have to worry about, whether there's a fire, and establishing contacts, building relationships. These are all things you do. There's an old adage, the time to exchange business cards is not during the disaster, it's before. You want to have those cards on hand so you know who to call or you know where to go for information. The other thing is understanding the difference between mitigation and damage. If you do nothing, you have damage. Nobody wants to see that. Mitigation is truly about lessening the impact of the disaster, removing it if you can. For instance, if you're in a flood area, if you can, not build or not work in a flood area, great. You can elevate your structure so you're mitigating against the flood, great. We can't stop earthquakes, so what we can do is strengthen the buildings, bolt homes to the foundation, offer K-bracing in commercial structures. There's a lot of things we can do to mitigate, to lessen the impact. But it's that, or we wait for the disaster to happen, in this case, an earthquake, and then we have damage. And sometimes that damage is not recoverable, repairable. In this case of this home, you can't fix this. It has to be raised. So you don't want to go through that. Instead, taking the actions to mitigate first. Good news is that our building codes are always improving. Every time they're improving every 3 years, they're making changes to it. We know that we actually have very strong building codes in this state. Whether you're at home or at work, these are important things to know. And I'm going to mention a lot about home. I normally wouldn't do that other than to say your employees should be prepared at home. And it's because since the pandemic, we have changed the way we operate our businesses. We are working, for instance, in offices, in some cases, if you are a retail location, so you are working from your business space. But a lot of businesses are now also operating at home. And I don't know if that's going to change for a long time right now. There are a lot of variables, but maybe businesses are operating in both locations. So now, as businesses, we're not only having to prepare our commercial space, we're also having to prepare our employees at home, because that's also where we're working. So I'm going to mention both now, because that's your workforce, that's you. And it's important to know that if people are not prepared at home, that's going to have an impact on your business and your operations if that's where they're going to be working, or in general, they're not going to be coming back to work anytime quickly because they're going to be dealing with the issues at home. So what is at stake when it comes to businesses and nonprofits? We've got livelihood, jobs, financial security, the community standing. And for you, it's the potential default on any loans or obligations. These are significant financial impacts. And as a community, we rely on small businesses. I think since the pandemic, everyone understands that, but we rely on small businesses to be operational because it affects our whole economic base. And we're really in this together. So when we talk about impacts of small businesses, 99% of the businesses in the United States are small. They employ 50% of all the private sector employees out there. So private sector and these small businesses are really an important part of our communities. The thing is that the impacts can be also significant. And I'm going to go to the next slide so you can see what I'm talking about. 40% of businesses that are hit by a disaster will not reopen after a disaster. That's a big number. And again, we've seen that from the pandemic. A lot of businesses didn't come back. 25% of those that that were impacted will close down within 1 to 2 years. So the impacts don't just stop with the end of the disaster, they continue to go for years. And that number, it can go up for many years, 5, 10 years even. Businesses will limp along and then eventually close with a lot of financial impacts to the owners. So that's why we talk about so much being done or needing to be done in advance. So average daily losses per day for a small business is $3,000, which for some larger business may not think that's a lot. That's a lot to a small business. If you look at medium-sized businesses, that number per day is $23,000. Again, the numbers start to add up just from being closed. And we know that from the pandemic, the numbers really start to add up. So we want to limit that or minimize that as much as possible. Now, for a large business, just in perspective, the number for a large business to be down per hour is around $99,000. So again, it's economies of scale. But again, if you're the small business, that $3,000 is everything. So it's about motivation as far as seeing that there are going to be financial impacts. And most people are not comfortable with this. So you want to take action to make sure you're not going to be impacted. So most businesses don't have any cash reserves available to repair, damage, cleanup, or replace broken items. That's probably the biggest thing on this slide that I really want to have in the back of your minds. Most people don't have credit lines. Most people don't have those cash reserves. They don't have savings. And so it is a huge financial impact when a disaster happens. Again, whatever you can do to minimize the impact is better, because then you're not going to have to worry about having to repair or having all these other issues. So that's one thing to keep in mind, is that if you wait, that mitigation versus damage slide, if you wait for the disaster to happen, that's when you're going to have a lot more impacts and a lot more losses. So why do we repair? We know that the utilities may not work. As far as the scenario with Shakeout, we were talking up to 6 months for power outages. With water, same. There's a lot being done in California to upgrade and improve all of our systems, but we as businesses rely on these utilities to be operational. You can't run a restaurant without water. You can't run most businesses without power. So we have to have some measures in place. And if this is important for you, these are things that there are things you can do to prepare to make sure that you've got a generator or other measures that will help your business if you do need power. Also, roads may be impassable. If having the transportation lines open is important to you, these are things that you need to plan around. And this is, again, just keeping your eyes open on some things that may impact you. Grocery stores, pharmacies, all those, anything that has inventory may be down, or you may be a grocery store or a pharmacy. These can have, and I'm going to show you some other slides later, these can have impacts not only on your organization, but if you are reliant on other businesses in order to run your operations, that can have detrimental impacts. And getting accurate information can be also challenging. So that's why we want to do these things in advance. So more can be done and should be done at every level, at your individual level, at the community level, maybe working with businesses, maybe in your neighborhood area, community-wide, and in the state. There's a lot that can be done. Businesses, nonprofits, government, all working together. We are truly all in this together when a disaster happens, and we really need to start that relationship building before something happens. So a little bit about the Earthquake Country Alliance, if you're not familiar. They're the great minds behind the Great Shakeout. As I said, started more than 13 years ago. It's a public-private grassroots organization that brings together, that wants to help educate people about earthquakes and tsunamis and things that they can do, what measures and materials can be shared to help educate people about the risk, and also how to go about minimizing impacts, how to protect yourselves, whatever it might be on that particular topic. We have regional alliances throughout the state that focus on the geographic areas, but all information is shared. And actually, Earthquake Country Alliance has been a catalyst for Shakeout worldwide. So it's a great organization, and there's a link here to join the alliance. We have sector-based outreach committees, and I chair the business committee, and we actually develop materials. Other businesses, we get together and develop materials that would be helpful to all businesses. If that's something of interest, feel free to join. We'd love to have you. And at the core of what ECA, or Earthquake Country Alliance, has done is we've had the 7 steps to earthquake safety. It targets, as you'll see here, it targets at home, but we've modified the 7 steps to be used for businesses. Very similar. And again, because we have a lot of people working at home, actually understanding both, I think, is really important, that you can use them in both locations. We've got 4 of the 7 steps are before, 2 are during disaster, and 1 is after. So with that, we've got a lot of materials to, again, explain about earthquakes. There's even some additions related to COVID and recommended actions, because we want people to be safe. When shaking starts, it's like those business cards. You want to know what to do beforehand. And when shaking starts, you want to act correctly. So this particular session is all around the 7 steps to disaster resilient workplace. And that's those 7 steps that's been modified for businesses. But we have some other materials, again, looking at home and things that you can do to prepare. So this is what I'm going to get into now. These 7 steps, you can find them on the ECA website. You can also go to resilientworkplace.org, and you will find the 7 steps booklet there, which is the foundation work that every business should start on to get going when it comes to preparedness and being resilient. There's another resource on there, Quake Smart, which again focuses on earthquakes. It's what you do non-structurally and structurally to prepare your business, which is kind of the next step. And also the third resource there is the DRB Toolkit, which I'll explain a little bit later. It's a plan builder. So those are things that you can get to just by going to resilientworkplace.org. So when you get into the 7 steps, you have a little pre-work. Part of it is to understand what your hazards are. We talked about earthquakes. We know the earthquakes are there, but there may be some other risks to your business. So just listing them out, just trying to get things on paper, figuring out what those are. Then you want to look at your organization internally. What are some things that may cause challenges, whether it's an earthquake or other hazards that could cause damage, cause injuries, or affect your operations. And you can list those out. And then external. Maybe you have a railway nearby. Maybe you're near a freeway overpass. Maybe you have a gas station near you. Start listing out both internally and externally what's near you to help you kind of figure out the scope of what you need to think about when it comes to planning. Next, looking at these pre-steps, every business and organization can be divided into 6 critical business assets. Every business has them, and they are people, data, building, inventory, equipment, and operations. And I'll slow down and tell you those in a second. But at this point, it's looking at each one of your critical assets and then determining what the impact of these different natural hazards would be on those particular assets. And part of it is to help you to better understand your organization, to better understand where your vulnerabilities may lie, and also to better understand what you may need to focus on first. You know, we talk about low-hanging fruit is a good way to start, but also you may think, oh, as far as catastrophic would be earthquake on all of these fronts. Well, then these are some things that you need to focus on. Or maybe for people, for you, that's really critical for you. So you want to make sure that you start on those items for multi-hazards. Again, this is information to help you with decision-making. But let's talk about those critical business assets. I'm going to go just give you a little bit about each one so you understand how it applies to you. So for data, it's all your documents, whether it's physical or electronic, any files, anything that you keep, like medical records, if you're a doctor's office, dentist's office, legal documents, it could be your space planning documents, anything that you would need to help make decisions. These are really important items that you want to protect. So data everyone thinks of data as only being electronic. That's not the case. We still are very much using paper copies, hard copies of things. It could be your customer records. That's all information that you want to protect. So data becomes one critical asset. Second critical asset is operations. I mean, it sounds kind of straightforward, but it's how you do what it is that you do. And it's really important, and most businesses don't spend a lot of time thinking about it because they just do what they do, is how do you do it? And what are you reliant on? So for instance, for you, maybe it's you get checks in the mail. So your mail room or how you receive checks becomes really important. Maybe it's accounts receivable, making sure people pay you is very important. If you're a restaurant, it's food preparation. So really looking at what it is that you do and break it down into those little steps of what it is that you do, because then you're going to find some areas that are either going to be high on your list that have to be actually operational as quickly as possible when there's a disruption, or some that maybe don't need to be as high on the list. But when you've got those top priority ones, then it makes a lot more sense as far as what you need to recover first, second, and third. Third is inventory. Now, not all businesses are inventory based. But the thing here is that everybody has supplies that they stock. And if you have emergency supplies, these are things that definitely you want to be keeping inventory track of as far as things that need to be rotated and so forth. But if you are an inventory-based business, this is your lifeblood. This is everything. If you were to lose your inventory, it would be catastrophic to the business. So how do you protect the inventory? Unfortunately, a lot of businesses don't spend a lot of time on the protection for things like earthquakes or things falling over or flooding, things that are on the bottom shelves. What happens, however, is that, and I'll be honest, what I've heard from businesses is that the reason why is that it's because it's easy. It's easy not to do these things. Oh, it's just, we keep grabbing these things off the shelf. And so it's just too hard to close the cabinet or whatever it might be. That doing it or not doing it because it's easy to just leave it open and people can access it can be catastrophic. It can cause a lot of losses. And again, you can lose your inventory because of it. Those easy things can be costly. So instead, close the cabinet, put the netting back down, make sure things are behind the bar, however it is that you need to protect that inventory, making sure that you do it. If you've got things on low shelves and the potential for flooding, could be, water main break, could be rain, whatever it might be, river flooding, elevate those things so that anything that's really expensive or would be a big loss for you, make sure they're not on the bottom shelves. And then also anything heavy for earthquakes, you don't want them on the top shelves either. So just making sure that you're making those good decisions to protect that inventory of yours. Fourth critical asset is equipment. Now, obviously anymore, computers are really important. I know we've gone to a lot of smaller devices, handheld devices, and phones have become our kind of equipment of choice. But you may also have a business that uses specialty equipment. If you're a medical office, it could be X-ray machines or other equipment. It could be manufacturing equipment, something that specifically you use for creating your widgets, whatever it might be. That's really important equipment because most businesses don't have a second piece of equipment just laying around waiting to be used. The other thing is a lot of the specialty equipment, some of it has parts or the equipment itself comes from overseas. And as we've been seeing with supply chain interruptions that have been going on since the pandemic, the repair, the replacement of these items can also be significantly long. So if you have specialty equipment, you want to protect it. You want to make sure it's not going to be damaged, so you're not going to be in the line with everyone else trying to replace this equipment. And that includes computers and monitors. If that's really important for your business, you're going to be waiting with everybody else if you don't protect these items. So your equipment can be really significant as far as an item that you do want to address. Your fifth critical asset are buildings. Now, this has changed a lot since the pandemic. Most businesses would say, oh, our building's everything. A lot's changed. So there are people who are working from home. We've got much of the workforce that's working from home, unless they're in a retail location or manufacturing or something like that, where the building is really critical. The home becomes kind of the secondary office. But if you have a building where you're renting space or you own space, could be warehouse, it could be a storefront, whatever it might be, if that's critical for you, what you do to protect the building, or if you lease a space, work with the building owner or manager to make sure that certain items are being addressed, because we want to be able to have these businesses functioning when a disaster happens, like an earthquake. And you've got to start those conversations in advance to make sure that those buildings are going to be available for you. So that's, again, that critical area. And the last, but definitely not least, are people. And it's not just your employees. Your employees are a really important part of it. It's also your customers. It could be your vendors, suppliers, could be your visitors that you take regularly, or could be volunteers if you're a nonprofit. These are the people that keep your operations running. These are the people that you rely on to sell to, whatever it might be, or supply some of your goods or services for that matter. So this is something that, this is something where how you address your people becomes really important, because you don't want, and this used to be many years ago, nobody thought about the people. Everyone thought about data and the systems, and people were left off. And again, if people are not prepared at home, they're not coming back to work very fast. So you want to make sure that you're including your people and figuring out ways to protect them, the life safety aspect, but also incorporating them, including them in training. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. So those are your 6 critical assets, and you're going to go through for each one, figure out what the impacts would be for these different hazards, and it will help you to understand what your where your risks are and where you may need to focus first. And then you can score those, and it helps with the priorities. And there's a resource out there that takes those 6 critical assets and actually helps you take it to the next level, which is how do you protect each one? What are measures you can take and preparedness actions you can take for the 6 critical areas to focus on those specifically. So I mentioned that at this point because that may be something that you're thinking about. So you go to resilienceinabox.org and you can find this workbook. So now that we've done the pre-work, that gets us into step 1. Step 1 is to secure your space. The whole point here is to reduce injuries and damage. We know if we're reliant on equipment, we're reliant on products, inventory, whatever it is, we want to protect those things. And we know during an earthquake, things that are not bolted down, strapped down, connected in some way or secured in some way become projectiles. If you haven't been through an earthquake or a significant one, it seems strange. It's like, is that possible? It is definitely possible. And I can show you many pictures of things like those old heavy monitors we used to have on all our desks, launched across and actually embedded into a wall on the other side. That's the kind of force that can take something that we think of as heavy, not easy to move, like a refrigerator, and can topple it over. It's important to know that because these are things that we make assumptions they're not going to move. That's not the case. The earth is going to be moving and it's going to move these items. So we want to make sure we're protecting both the product, the the equipment, but it's really about protecting people because people are in all of these spaces. And this is the same at home. You want these items to be secured so no one's going to be injured at home as well. So secure those movable items. Now, if it's something heavy that you have on a shelf, put the heavy thing and put it, sorry about the sirens. You can put those items on a lower shelf, which will make it a lot better. Heavy items are going to tip over faster. So move the heavy items to the lower shelf also because you don't want them falling on people. And if it's a movable item, you want to secure it. There's a lot of great products out there, and I'm going to show you a lot of different ways to secure these items. We've now gone to these thin monitors. They're easier to tip over, just like we've gone to the thin TVs. They're easier to tip over, but there's some very simple ways to secure them. And these things cost less than $20, $10, depending on which ones you buy. And that will save you having to spend hundreds and potentially thousands of dollars to replace the equipment. So it really is worth it. So this is just a few examples of things of how they can move around. You see shelves have fallen over. I have pictures of offices where all kinds of filing cabinets and things have fallen down. And that's can be really a significant impact to anyone who's sitting in those areas. Those things are really heavy. But there's also, through the Earthquake Country Alliance, there are a lot of good resources on how to secure these items and products out there, both from Ready America, the Quake Hold products, as well as Safety Proof. Great products that are out there that can help you. So TVs and electronics we mentioned, and you can see that one picture, which just gives me chills, watching a child climbing up on a, and it happens, I think once every 8 seconds, a child is injured by doing this very thing, crawling up on shelves or a bureau and having the thing fall over on them. These are things that can be secured. Both the furniture can be secured and then the equipment, in this case, the TV on top. You don't want these things falling over on anybody on a daily basis, but definitely when an earthquake, they're more likely to fall. So you definitely want them secured. And if you look in around your office, you can look around and see the likelihood of what's going to fall over. Wall hangings. That's another thing, is that we put a lot of nice things in the wall. We put art in our offices, and these things are usually not hung all that well. Sometimes it's just a nail that's put them in place, and they're heavy. They have glass on them, and they also will jump off the wall, become projectiles, and now you've got glass everywhere, not to mention someone can be injured by them. Great products out there, closed hooks, amazing hooks out there. There's some really great products out there. And the main thing is that you want to keep them from flying off. You can also secure larger items by putting a putty, quake putty in the corners, because it's not only coming off, you want to keep it from banging and breaking. So you can put putty on to keep them against the wall. And so in the shaking, it's not going to be moving around very much. Smaller items, as I mentioned, the earthquake putty, you can put, like if you have breakables, if you have display items, anything like that that you have that could potentially fall over or break, you can use that. There's also this museum wax that they do use in museum. It's clear. If you have large items, you can use the museum wax on that as well. So there's some, again, great products out there just to know that they're there. Kitchen cabinets or in your office in the break rooms, things like that. Again, these are potential of having a lot of people getting injured just by having things flying out. Plates are very heavy. And refrigerators and those kinds of things. So you definitely want to secure those items. Now, just to give you an idea, this is, think about, again, our work environment, our home environment, when you deal with shaking, this is the potential. And this is why we want to secure these items. This is on a shake table. And it's simulating an actual earthquake. Now, the thing I would like you to note is how quickly these things fell over. They didn't rock back and forth, which sometimes they can in smaller earthquakes. They actually all just fell around at the same time. That's why you need to move quickly. That's why these things need to be secured, because you don't have time to go, oh, what am I going to do? What should I do? No, you don't have that. You have seconds. And that's the difference between someone being injured and not. So you really want to secure these things in advance. Likes to play twice. Here's another one, again, looking at heavy furniture. So again, you think of something like a refrigerator, oh, it's heavy, it's not really going to move. Oh yes, it does move. And you can see it empties out. High shelves, things that are really high fall over. It's really important to secure these items. Second thing that we'll talk about a little bit later is what people should do. And again, if you've participated in Shakeout, you know about drop, cover, and hold on. But that's the other thing, is that you don't want to be standing up. You don't want your head to be a target for these things that are going to become projectiles. You want to stay low, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Sorry, likes to play twice. Okay. So water heaters, large appliances, many things are strapped. I will tell you, making sure that the straps go around 1.5 times on the water heater and they're cinched up and secured against the wall. Same with other items. If you're a restaurant or you have large kitchen supplies, these are, again, things you want to make sure they're not pulling out, because a lot of these things are also using gas. So if they fall away from the wall, they can also pull the gas lines out, which can also cause additional damage. So securing this equipment becomes really important. So there's a Secure Your Space campaign that the Earthquake Country Alliance has been doing. And again, these are things you can do at work and at home. There's a lot of great resources on how to do it. You can go to secureyourspace.org and get all the information, find out about the products out there. This is something that, again, you can share with your employees. It can be something that you talk about on a regular basis, all really good things to do, because it's not just you as the building business owner, it's also what your employees do that could make them safer, what they do in their work area, what they do in their homes if they're working from home. These are all really important things. And again, we're all in this together. So sharing this information, getting people to take action and take their health and well-being importance seriously, I think is a good part of it. So good thing is really easy, doesn't cost anything, is take a heavy object and move it to a lower location. That's a simple secure your space thing that you could do today, and it doesn't take any effort. Then you can look at some of these other items that could fall over, and you then secure them a little bit at a time. You don't need to do everything at once. That's too much. And people again will think, oh, I don't want to deal with this now. Do something, do one thing every weekend or over time. Enlist your employees to do it, especially those that, if it's something where it may require a drill, get someone who's handy with drills. I mean, there's a lot that you can do, and then encourage the same actions to be done at home. Help each other out. So now we get into step 2. Now we know we've secured those items. Now let's start talking about planning to be safe. The main things about planning to be safe, again, is to create a business continuity plan. This is your disaster plan. This is, again, everything you're figuring out that you're going to need or use in advance, and then you'll use it during a disaster, and it will help you recover afterwards. It's intended to help you with decision making. It's intended to help you with figuring out different things you need to focus on, because every business is different. I would love to say that a cookie cutter approach means one business doing it their way. If they share their plan with you, oh, that great, we have a plan. It doesn't work that way. I'm sorry. It's very specific to an individual business, because even to banks, even to restaurants, you're going to operate differently. Your physical space is different. Your people are different. So it has to be customized and specific to your individual business or organization. So that's the first thing. The other thing is how you're going to communicate. You know, another adage is communication is the first thing to get broken. It's really important to look at your communications and who you need to communicate with. Obviously, your employees come first of mind, but there are others that you need to communicate with as well. So in the 7 steps to an earthquake resilient, or to a disaster resilient business, I'm mixing up the old and the new, 7 steps to a disaster resilient workplace, which is the new title. We have these basic items that have to be in every plan. Doesn't matter the type of business, the size of the business, none of that matters. You have to have these same basic elements, and that's in the booklet. And it's things like your employee emergency contacts, key contacts list. It could be a very significant customer, it could be vendor supplier, it could be regulatory agencies, people that you would need to communicate, for instance. You want to have that contact information. And going beyond a business number, you want to have cell phones. For your employees, you want to have what their social media handles are. You want to have spouse or significant other information. You want to go as deep as you possibly can, because that's where you're going to find people. In too many instances, people have only had work phone numbers and they had no cell phone numbers. So you want to definitely get as much information as possible. But these are all things that you would need as the basics for your plan. And that's where we want to start. The next thing I want to mention is taking from the 7 steps. There are some other great resources. I'm going to put on my nonprofit hat here. The DRB, or Disaster Resistant Business Toolkit, is one of those tools out there that builds on the 7 steps and then takes it to the next level. So start with the 7 steps in the booklet. And when you're ready to do the actual plan building and actually putting something together, then the toolkit's your next step. And let me just explain how that works, because they're one step to the next. So we're a nonprofit made up of subject matter experts, business continuity people from public, private, nonprofit sector who had been in your shoes, trying to figure out how to do all of this stuff. Googled preparedness online and found millions of sites, didn't know what to do. So we really wanted to design something that would be easy for people who have never done this before, as a way for them to learn as they go and end up with something that will help them. All user-friendly, and in the process to strengthen the relationship between the public sector and the private sector, because when it comes to disasters, there needs to be good communication, as well as the local community does a lot to develop resources and information. So you want to know what those things are in advance. So it becomes something that is complementary as far as your planning. So I'm just showing you, this is what the toolkit looks like. It's a step-by-step approach. It has chapters that break it down into different steps. There are videos, interactive content, and it's customized. This becomes yours, and it's something you use specifically for you, and you put all your information in there to help you walk through what you need to do. And again, it's an application that helps you plan before, during, and after. The thing that I will say that the fortunate thing about this session is that we are working with the California Office of Emergency Services and FEMA to provide this toolkit to California businesses. So if you're interested in the toolkit, that's great, because you can send an email to info@drbtoolkit.org, and we'll make sure to get you on a pre-list for the toolkit. So that's something that is kind of a thank you for being here today. So you get an early toolkit. Again, send to info@DRBtoolkit, or you can even go to drbtoolkit.org and see the other resources that are on the pages. So back to our planning, step 2. So planning is something that you are thinking about how you're going to respond, and your plan should incorporate whether it's the utilities, how you're going to need to shut them off, if you have gas. All of that needs to be put into your plan, are the procedures that you will take to take those actions to protect yourselves. And it's same for responding, having fire extinguishers, knowing how to use the fire extinguishers. They're there for a reason. I think most people pass by them and go, yeah, that's a fire extinguisher. Most people don't know how to use them. They've never actually held one before. It's a great thing to have training to actually, and people love it. I would highly recommend it. Is to have fire extinguisher training to show people how to use it. Because honestly, when there is a fire, you want people to know how to work correctly. If they don't even pick it up off the wall, because they're not even going to know how to pull the pin and twist it off, and that's complicated. So the main thing is you want to know how to use these things and train people on how to use them, because again, these small fires can turn into big ones, and you want people to know how to do that. And also what kind of fire extinguishers should be used for the different types of fires, the ABCs, that type of thing. Great information. Your fire department is a wealth of information and resources and can help you with how to use these fire extinguishers. Also, practicing earthquake safety. You have to plan on how you're going to respond. As I mentioned, drop, cover, and hold on is the right thing to do when there's the ground shaking. If you are in a wheelchair or a walker, it would be lock, cover, and hold on. So you would modify it just a little bit. But the thing is that when there's significant shaking, as you saw from those videos, you don't want to be knocked down. You want to get down on the floor in your own controlled way before you're knocked down. You don't want to be standing up. And you want to protect yourself from any of those flying objects. Again, you want your head and your neck protected so that if you don't have anything to get underneath, like a table or a desk, you want to protect yourself by staying low and covering those areas. So drop, cover, and hold on. And again, you're seeing on these slides that we've got on the earthquakecountry.org, each step is listed out. So there's even more information on the website. So when should you protect yourself? Well, if you feel shaking, obviously, when you're doing a drill, such as the shakeout, or when you get an earthquake warning, an earthquake early warning that might come out. These are all reasons to protect yourself because you know that either shaking has started or it's going to. With earthquake early warning, it might give you 10 seconds, 15 seconds or more that something's coming, which could keep you from standing under, a chandelier or something that might be a little more dangerous. So with earthquake early warning, if you haven't heard about that, this is to give you just a little bit of time. If it's a far away event, it'll give you a little bit of time before the shaking actually arrives. Otherwise, the shaking is going to be right on top of you and you should respond and act correctly. But if you can get 10 seconds, 5 seconds, whatever it is, to actually take a few actions to protect yourself, great. And there's, you can go to earthquake.ca.gov and download the MyShake app. Again, great resources out there for earthquake warnings in California to give you a little bit of time. Again, don't wait on the warning, but you want to make sure that if you can get a little bit of warning, it's good. Otherwise, shaking is going to be your indicator that an earthquake's happening. Also planning to respond, for instance, at home, we talk about keeping shoes and a flashlight and a clothes bag attached to the bed, but also it's having these items at work, having the items in your car because you never know where you're going to be when an earthquake occurs. So having these items available to you can be really important. Additional items that you can have, you just want to make sure that people are trained. Like a fire extinguisher, you want to have training to tell people how to use these items. So that is step 2. Step 3, and that is where we get into, you now have done some planning, you've secured the items in your space. Now we get into your disaster supplies. So the reason why we don't talk about disaster supplies until this point is that if you do none of those other things, but you have a first aid kit, you're going to have to deal with a lot of disruption, a lot of impact. So the hope is that your first aid kit and your disaster supplies are basically an enhancement to what you've already done. So you don't have a lot of damage or injuries because of these other things that have not been secured. But here, when you think of a business, companies sometimes will supply certain things, whether it's food, energy bars, water. Different companies will supply different things because they know their employees may be stuck at work for a while. And anything the company doesn't supply, you want to take your own personal action to make sure, whether it's your own medication or having an extra set of glasses, if you wear contacts, those sorts of things at your workstations. The other thing is taking that information home and having something in your car. If you commute a lot, spend a lot of time in your car, you definitely want to have something. If you're stranded, we know you can get stranded anytime on the roadways in California. You want to make sure you have something there. So whatever it is, this is just an example. We have a lot of examples on the Earthquake Country website. The target is for a minimum of 3 days, up to 2 weeks. So again, if you're organizing this for the company, water is going to be one of the most important things, especially in the Coachella Valley. Water is definitely important. So having extra supply is going to be really important. And then these other items that can be seen as assistance. So you can get that information there. And I think we all have heard a lot about emergency supplies, but the main thing is if you haven't, the Earthquake Country site and step 4 will have a lot more information for you. I'm sorry, step 3 will have a lot of information. So now we get into step 4, minimizing financial hardship. So that is organizing those important documents. It's strengthening your property. We've talked about the contents and your space. Now we're talking about the structure itself, and then considering insurance. So this is all part of step 4. And this is things, again, if you're at home, you can do these things at home. If you're at work, you can do them in your workspace. So important documents. Insurance policies become important, legal documents become important. And for every business, it might be some documents that are unique to your organization or your operations. So figure out what those things are. It could be, and I've heard this from some businesses, where it is the customer records, historical data. It could be looking at particular products that they've purchased and just having that on hand so that you know how to resupply. Whatever it might be, it's whatever it is that's important to you makes it important for you to protect. And what I would say is that there's some things you can have electronically. Again, you can store these things on the cloud really easily. It's very simple now to do that, but there may be other things that you have hard copies of that you would want to make sure that you're protected, whether it's putting in a fire safe or having it in a grab and go kit that is somewhere that you can get access to. Again, it has to be offsite, not on the business, not at the business site. So things that you have backups of, these are all important. You can put them on key fobs and then have them password protected so people can't get to them. There's a lot of ways that you protect your documents. It's just about what you would need. Again, these are things that may help you with decision making. They may have legal requirements. They may have certain sensitive information. Whatever it is, you have to decide for yourself what those are and then organize them and then figure out how to protect them. The policies can be really important. And I would say, for most people, they don't like to look at the insurance policies. It's challenging for many people, but the thing is that you should definitely look at it so you know in advance what to expect when something happens. What's covered, what's not covered is really important. I think a lot of businesses have found out the hard way when something wasn't covered. So you do want to look at those things in advance in addition. So this is actually a FEMA document they've provided to looking at homes, emergency financial first aid. It's how to organize. And I think that the pandemic has really brought a lot of this home as far as how tenuous our finances can be when we have disruptions that have lasted 18 plus months. Nothing that anyone had ever expected. So it's really important to look at it from an individual and your family standpoint, but also these same lessons can be brought into the workplace and how you are protecting or saving or putting money aside to deal with the things related to your income or the income of all your employees. So it's one of those things where you need to look at it. And again, this is a great tool to look at it for home, but apply those same lessons learned at work. So again, a good tool for you looking at the financial aspects. The one thing I will say about finance is that I know with small businesses, very few have anything in reserve. And especially after the last 18 months, that has been even more challenging. The one thing I'll say is we don't know how long this is going to go on. And as we've seen, there are natural disasters that are natural hazards that are happening while the pandemic's going on. We had Hurricane Ida, we've had floods, we've had earthquakes. These are things that happen all the time, but when you add it to something else that's going on, such as the pandemic, it makes us even more vulnerable. So just again, take a few steps to think about maybe where you might have some resources or where you might need to do some planning or plan ahead. Insurance can be one of those things that maybe is something you would incorporate into your financial first aid. That again, these are things just to think about to help give you more in your toolbox to help you to recover and be more resilient. When we look at, again, step 4 is protecting the building itself. We know when it comes to houses, we have a good track record with buildings, with our building codes as far as single family homes, wood frame homes, things like that. If you live in a house that was built before, or your employees live in a house that was built before 1980, there is the Brace and Bolt program that the California Earthquake Authority has, and they have grants up to $3,000 to help people do retrofit, because these homes were not actually bolted to the foundation, which can be a vulnerability, and they can slide enough to do the damage you saw in that picture early in the presentation. So go to Earthquake Brace and Bolt. You can sign up. They rotate. I think towards the end of the year, they actually start opening up applications again. Again, this is for you, for your employees. If people are working from home, you want those houses to be standing. And even if they're not working from home, we all want our employees and our own houses to be standing if we live in one of these 1980 or older houses. Commercial structures are a little bit different, but again, you want to work with your building owner or manager. If you lease, if you're an owner, you want to take a look at the structure itself and see if there are things that need to be done to make it stronger, to strengthen it, to make sure it's going to be available to you when you need it after the shaking stops, or whatever hazard may be concerning for you, whether it's flooding or other things that may be at risk. So again, our building codes are there for a reason, but there are things that we can do to strengthen our buildings. Again, with the California Earthquake Authority, they have done a lot to make earthquake insurance, less expensive, more reasonable. If you haven't looked in a while, people have kind of swore off earthquake insurance years ago. It's a good time to go back and take a look at it, because again, anything that's not covered by insurance, you go out of pocket on. So you definitely want to take a look and see if there's something new that may be available to help you. And that's at earthquakeauthority.com. So now that we get to the end of step 4, that is what you do in advance. Step 5 is now during. Now the shaking, in this case, shaking has started. And now what it is that we need to think about is, what do we do? We see in those animations or the videos, we don't have very much time. We have seconds. So seconds really count. So shaking starts, drop, cover, and hold on. If you're in a wheelchair or in a walker, you can lock, cover, and hold on. But the main thing is you want to act immediately. And that's why Shakeout's so important. We want people to practice what to do, because you get that muscle memory of, oh, that's right, we did this, drop, cover, and hold on. And it's wherever you are. It doesn't have to be at work. If you're at home, if you're in the grocery store, if you're at school, wherever it is, you can do it anywhere. And the Shakeout's great because it's free. It takes 1 minute to practice, and you will definitely remember. It definitely stays with you. The whole idea is to protect yourself from falling down, being knocked down, to get on the floor and protect yourself from those flying objects and falling objects. So why do we drop, cover, and hold on? It's really a lot of re-education. It's a lot of bad information that was out there, a lot of misinformation. Maybe you heard doorways. We don't recommend that. It's drop, cover, and hold on. And there's a lot, and I'm not going to go through the details of the slide, but just to say that this is what's recommended by all the expert: drop, cover, and hold on. So the main thing is that you want to protect yourself. Again, those flying objects, things that can fall, and increase your chance of survival. That's the whole point. You can see there's a picture here from Calexico, from the earthquake that occurred there. This was a school. And these are those non-structural, the contents, the space area, the space items that can fall. Now, it doesn't look, when you're looking at this picture, you might think that none of that looks that hard. Those lights weigh a lot. Those lights can be deadly. The ceiling tiles, while the ceiling tiles themselves may not be as heavy, some of them are heavier. And then there's equipment above there. Those are things that can fall. And see how the desks can protect anyone that would go underneath them to drop, cover, and hold on. So that's why we do it, is that we don't want our head, again, to be that target where things are going to be falling on us. Stay low, drop, cover, and hold on. And if you can get underneath a table, a desk, something sturdy, do that and hold on to it, because the shaking is going to move that table around. So you want to adapt. Again, if you can't get down, or you can get down, but you may not be able to get back up, maybe it's an injury, practice with others who can assist you, and adapt the drop, cover, and hold on based on your physical abilities, or any limitations you have. Maybe you have a softball injury. Maybe you twisted your ankle last week, something like that. Is that ask for help so that you can kind of work through what to do, but modify it in the case of lock, cover, and hold on. So how do you protect yourself? Again, drop onto your hands and knees wherever you are. Cover your head and neck with one arm and hand. Again, you want to protect the back of your head and your neck. That's a sensitive area. You want to protect it. Again, this is going to be a much better area than just leaving it exposed. And if you have something nearby, crawl under there, keep yourself protected, crawl under there, looking for that protection, and hold on to that shelter until the shaking stops. Again, it may move. You want to move with it, especially if it's something that has wheels on it. For instance, I know we have a lot of wheeled tables in our workspaces. So that's the basic: drop, cover, and hold on. And here's just a few examples using a walker: lock, cover, and hold on. Again, with a wheelchair, lock, cover, and hold on. You want to see that head below the next levels. You want your head lower than the next highest surface is the main thing, because whatever's going to fall is going to hit that next highest surface. So the good thing about the Earthquake Country Alliance, who's behind Shakeout, is there are all kinds of great videos that talk about these different scenarios. And maybe you are a theater. It may be you might be in one of these scenarios, but also to tell people what to do, no matter where they are, how to drop, cover, and hold on. So this is great information out there on shakeout.org. And you can watch these videos, share with your employees, take the information home. Good information to have. Again, the Shakeout, You can participate in it every year on the third Thursday or any day you want to participate. It's perfectly fine to have your drill whenever you like. And it's just good for people to practice, because when seconds count and that adrenaline hits, people know what to do. And that's what you want, that instant reaction. So once the shaking stops, so we've talked about shaking started. Now, once it stops, wait a minute. That adrenaline is still going to be really high. The natural reaction is to want to get up and start moving around. You want to wait a minute, take a breath, pause. And then, because some things may be teetering and falling that you can't see, and you want to wait and then move slowly and look around to see what may be actually right over your head, something that could be hanging, one of those lights. You want to really be careful about standing up so that you're not putting yourself in harm's way or in any danger. Also expect aftershocks. We know in California with the types of earthquakes that we have that aftershocks are anticipated depending on the size of the earthquake. Larger events will have many, many aftershocks. So you want to be prepared for more shaking. So if something's teetering on the edge, you don't want to be around that item, because an aftershock may come and knock that thing all the way over. So again, just know that that's something you need to keep in mind, is keeping yourself safe. And then once you're up, then you follow your emergency plan. It could be at that moment you're looking for anyone who's injured. If you need to evacuate, it may be that, most of our modern buildings, you don't need to evacuate unless there's a concern, fire or something else going on. It may be that everything's in a disarray and you don't need to evacuate unless you have that hazard. So it's assessing what's happening and helping on anyone who is injured. So again, that great shakeout, those drills that happen every year, great resources for you to practice what to do when the shaking starts. This year we had, as you see here, we had 7.6 million people participate in California. It's something that you can get everyone doing, work, home, school, everyone can do it. And it encourages the action, but it also makes sure that people are going to take that quick, safe action when seconds count. So it's really a good thing to do on an annual basis. Again, we're so busy with work and our jobs and what we need to do that taking a minute out is not a difficult thing, but it's something that will stay with you for a lifetime, and you will react correctly. You're more likely to react correctly when the shaking starts. So it's really a good idea. And kids love doing it. And it's actually can be a lot of fun in this environment, but again, it'll stay with you. So you do the right thing. So you can go to shakeout.org for more information, which we also have in Spanish. And I think, again, you can do these where you can have remote, as we're still in the pandemic, you can have remote drills where you're working with your employees at home as well, and encouraging them to take action. Also, I mentioned this one because you get people in businesses that really, fully grab onto this. There's great information that Shakeout and Earthquake Country Alliance has. You can be a drill leader, but you can be a drill leader for your business. And there are a lot of scenarios. There are drill manuals. There's great instructions. This is all free. This is free resources that available to you. But also for some people, they want to go out and kind of make the difference in the community too. So that's something that you can find out more about. But you can go to shakeout.org and learn more about that. And again, joining the Earthquake Country Alliance will give you access to this. Signing up for the Shakeout will give you lots of tips and tools. So this is all just right at your fingertips. So after step 5, we're still in the during. Step 6 is improve safety. So as I said, if there is a reason to evacuate, if the building is no longer safe, if there is a fire that breaks out, then definitely evacuate if necessary. If not, in our modern buildings, yes, things may have fallen over, but that doesn't mean they are structurally unsound. So you may not need to leave. And if you are in a downtown area, if you have, some mid-rise buildings near you and shaking has knocked windows out and there's glass around, just remember when you go outside of your building, you are now exposed to the different issues that may exist there, whether it's what's hanging outside the building, what things that have fallen from the buildings, things that may be down, like down power lines. These are all things that once you leave your building, you have to then assess what's going on outside your building, and you need to be careful. That's the big thing. But immediately after the shaking, as I said, you want to help anyone who's injured, whether it's, stop bleeding types of things, putting pressure on them. And there's a lot of training out there that will tell you how to do these things. The Red Cross, the American Heart Association has different trainings. There are a lot of great things. The fire department does different trainings. These are all things that you can incorporate into your business so that when you get to this point, this is what you can do to help your coworkers or anyone nearby. The other thing is prevent further injuries or damage. If you see that something, again, there's potential for aftershocks. If you see something that may fall over on somebody because it's teetering in a funny way, you can actually either shore it up, you can bring it down, you can remove it, because you don't want anyone else to be injured in going forward. So that's in the immediate time. Again, those aftershocks can happen and you don't want to have more damage. You don't want anyone else to be injured. So again, that's step 6, is trying to control what's just happened, care for the people that have been injured, and make sure things don't get any worse based on what you've experienced. So that is step 6, which then, that's the other thing. So you can see, here's a picture of an actual business that was evacuating during the shakeout drill. And the picture on the right, this was training done for a business on if somebody were to be trapped, how they would actually extract them. And this is considered light search and rescue. There's good training out there if anyone's interested in that sort of thing. And you use cribbing, which you can see here, and a fulcrum, or in this case is a crowbar, to actually pry an area up. And the main thing to know about a major earthquake is that businesses are not at the top of the list when it comes to the community. It's like, you have schools and hospitals and those sorts of organizations, and businesses are going to have to be on their own for a little while. So sometimes that's helped be a catalyst for businesses to say, you know what, we're going to have to take care of each other. Let's have this training. Let's figure out what we're going to do here. Let's make sure we secure the things in our buildings so that no one gets injured. Or let's have the types of training that can help people in case they do get trapped or something happens. This is all, again, tools at your fingertips for you to decide what you want to do and how you want to customize for your business. So now we move into the after period, and that is step 7, to reconnect and restore. That's where we want to get things as much back. Not that it's going to be normal per se, because something will always be different after a disaster's occurred. That's that flexibility and the resilience is to be able to adapt to that, but how to get back to things as normal as possible and how to reconnect people, because that's one of the things that happens with any disaster is that people are isolated. The pandemic is a prime example of people being isolated, how to bring people back together, and how you as a business can engage your workforce, how to work together, how to use people in different roles that can actually help with the mental health aspects of the recovery and getting people back up. You also want to deal with repairing damage if there was damage, and helping the community, because you're an important part of the community. By you getting up and running, you actually help foster community recovery. But there might be some additional things that you can do, the services, your products, or just your expertise you can bring to the community to help the community recover as well. Again, we're all in this together and we can work together when it comes to the recovery. So we want you to be open. We want you, if you are closed, to reopen as quickly as possible. That the mental health and reconnection, the personal aspects are really important. Telling your story, bringing people in, that's all a part of recovery. And there's assistance that's out there for small businesses. The SBA has assistance that can be made for these large events. And in the cases where you need to repair and do rebuilding of any sort, that's all part of this process. And there are a lot of resources out there. The state and California Office of Emergency Services, the local jurisdictions, the county and cities have a lot of resources. These will be important groups to work with on the recovery that have great programs. But it's also one of those things where you want to know, or at least have some relationships established in advance, because there's a trust factor. And when you've been through a traumatic event like we've been through for the last 18 months, you want to know who to go to, who is your trusted source of information. And when it comes to these different resources that are available for businesses, that's again, those people you want to go to. The chambers are a great resource. Love the chamber. So Rancho Mirage, great resource. And you want to go back to the chambers, and they're going to be the focal point for a lot of great resources and information. They speak to and for business. So people will go to them if they want to help in the community. And you definitely want to take advantage of the resources, whether it's economic development in your community or the chamber. Definitely you want to have that relationship established, which obviously if you're here, you do have that relationship, but you definitely want to participate and take part in their recovery measures that they instill. So I've mentioned a lot of resources, so I just want to mention a few more and then we'll open it up for questions. These are just different things that are out there to help you, whether it's from the planning standpoint or other items. I mentioned resilient workplace. We've talked a lot about the 7 steps to a disaster resilient workplace. We've gone through the 7 steps. That's that good basic booklet that helps you get started. Quake Smart is one, again, that's available on how to actually secure those things, the contents, as well as the structure, and then the toolkits of plan builder. So these are all things that are available to help you. When disaster does strike, the U.S. Chamber has the National Disaster Help Desk for Business. It's a 24/7 helpline to help small businesses. It's 888-MY-BIZ-HELP. You can call anytime. Looking for assistance. The idea is to help small business navigate the during and recovery timeframe, to put you in touch with resources. A lot of times it's pointing to the chamber and saying, you may not know, you may not be a member of a chamber. Here's a chamber that you should reach out to, and they have great resources to help you. You obviously have that information, so that's one you don't need to hear about. But there are other things. It's like how to navigate the SBA system, where there might be disaster assistance centers, those kinds of things. It's just to help you in the recovery process. So where do you start? What do you do first? It's up to you, but pick one thing. My ask, I guess, of you is to pick one thing, just one, and you get to decide what that is. And do that. Do it today. Pick your one thing. Again, getting prepared is like scratching an itch. Once you start, you can't stop. So you might as well get that one thing going. Pick a low-hanging fruit, something that's going to help you build some momentum. Or for some of you, you may pick something that's really high on your list as far as that critical factor, maybe one of your critical assets, one thing related to that because you know it's really important, and pick that. But just do that one. Really, it'll make a difference. And then if you want to connect with ECA, these are all the ways. There's earthquakecountry.org. You heard about shakeout.org, which is part of Earthquake Country. We have multiple languages as well. Facebook and Twitter, again, great resources. And year round, you will get new information that will help you, and tips and things to help with your planning, will help with your employees, will help with training, all of that kind of information that will make a difference for you. This is my contact information. If you have any questions, you can feel free to reach out to me. And with that, I will allow you to ask any questions if you have anything or any clarifications. But I will say thank you very much for your time. I know how valuable every minute is for each one of you. And I so appreciate you taking the time to be here. This is important. Obviously, I feel very strongly about all this, but I do know it makes a difference. Anything that you do in advance of a disaster really does make a difference as far as your ability to either lessen losses, save lives, or help you to bounce back when something does occur. So it really does matter. So thank you again. Looks like we do have one question. Disaster shacks with supplies to be set up for. Well, if what you're referring to, Michael, he's talking about disaster shacks with supplies for each community. There are different ways to do that. We see shipping containers. Schools will do this a lot. We'll see shipping containers with emergency supplies in them. That can be a great way to have them pre-stationed. You definitely want it somewhere where they can be somewhat protected, I guess, so that you don't have anyone trying to break into them type of thing. They have to be locked, but you also want to make sure that if they're locked, who has the locks to them? That can be a big issue. But that can be pre-stationing emergency supplies in a community can be great. You definitely want to look at that my hazard. You want to look at the community as a whole to figure out areas that aren't going to have significant problems, whether it's fire following earthquakes or flooding, or, whatever the issues might be, you want to pre-station those areas where they're going to have the least amount of risk. Also accessibility, where people can get to it, and so forth. But yeah, I do think that many communities use these. I've never heard them called disaster shacks before, but they can be great tools. You can have a lot of information and things that, if people are trained in how to use the information or the materials in them, that's good. But having information on how to use some of these items as well can be valuable. So don't just have the supplies, also have some quick reference sheet on how to use either supplies or how to take action, because it can be great, very valuable for people who maybe weren't engaged before, but are there to help and want to know what to do. You can hand them a quick sheet, quick reference guide that can help them, facilitate or be used in a manner that would help them with the recovery or assisting in the community. So I do think that they can be valuable. It's just about placement. That's the big question, is the placement.
Ines, I'll chime in a minute here if I
Sure.
may.
Absolutely.
This is Mary Lou. Here in Coachella Valley, we have a lot of homeowners associations that have formed teams, disaster preparedness teams. And typically they have a command center established.
Great.
That's been allowed through the HOA, giving them the space and the facility. Sometimes it's a room adjoining where their board of directors meets, something like that. But typically the supplies they have there are your first aid supplies, water and maybe energy bars for the volunteers who will be helping to search and rescue and do those kinds of activities. They don't really stockpile supplies for all the residents.
Right.
It's individual responsibility to provide your own water and food and flashlights and so forth and so on. So that's important to keep in mind. And we
Absolutely.
also have a lot of homes that are not located in homeowners associations, in which case it's up to neighborhoods to try to organize. And that's a little more difficult. We do have a program that we promote, and we're willing to go to individual neighborhoods and work with them to start what's called a Map Your Neighborhood program. And that was established in Washington State by their emergency management department. And it's really spread to many 40 states or 40 some odd states across the United States. And it's fun. It's a fun program. You really get to know your neighbors. And it's so comforting to know who lives in your neighborhood, what skills they have, and to actually plan together what you might do in an emergency. And it's good for especially families with children, so that those kids will have some idea of what might happen. You're encouraged to help the children pack their own go bag, that kind of thing, so they do know what to expect, what to do, and they feel as though they're at least somewhat prepared as well. And the same thing goes for seniors. The Coachella Valley is a large retirement home for many, many seniors. And that's a kind of a unique situation, and that seniors really need assistance probably to plan a go kit, to plan how to obtain extra medications for an extended period of time. All the things that a senior needs the help with on an everyday basis, to try to have 2 or 3 individuals who can be relied on to help that individual. So
Absolutely.
we have a unique situation here in several different ways.
Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned Map Your Neighborhood. I'm very familiar. I actually worked with the creator of Map Your Neighborhood, and she originally created it in Sunnyvale, California. That was when it was originally designed. Strongly, strongly, strongly recommend Map Your Neighborhood. It is truly, because I've seen it in action, it is something that truly makes a difference at the neighborhood level, because that's where people know each other and that where you can affect the best results. And you're right, it's up to the individual household to be able to put their own supplies together and so forth. But definitely when it comes to people working together, you may have a carpenter, you may have a nurse, you may have somebody within the neighborhood, you can put them to work to help each other out. It can make a huge difference, because we know that there just aren't enough resources at the local level, whether it's the fire department or otherwise, to be able to go into every community that's hit. There just aren't enough people. So we have to rely on one another in our neighborhoods, in our workplaces, to be able to help each other out, because it makes a difference.
Absolutely, yes. Thank you. The other thing I wanted to mention is that we do have another unique situation here. One of our HOAs exist in several high-rise buildings, and
Mhm.
they have actually allocated a shipping container and allowed their senior residents who live on the top floors to pack their go bags and locate them in the shipping container. So they won't have to try to handle all that while they're
Great.
exiting a building in an emergency. Just very good forethought. And
Yes.
a lot of good examples to follow here. If our HOAs want to work together, we're going to try to help facilitate that, where depending on where they are in their level of development, they may want to see what other HOAs have done.
Hmm.
So to try to work that out with them so they can get from their peers, from people who are in the process of doing the same things they're doing more or less, and
Well,
let them
you
work together.
absolutely, you have your own best practices, and part of it is just talking with one another and finding out, how did you deal with this, or how have you addressed that? And just like with a business, you can't use a cookie cutter approach, but you can take what someone's done over here and someone's done over here and make it work for your own community, whether it's a high-rise building or your neighborhood or your HOA. Really, it truly does take a village to come together and come up with whatever is going to make the most sense. And I love the idea that they put the go bags in the shipping container, but that makes the evacuation so much easier without them trying to, navigate with unwieldy backpacks and so forth. So that's terrific. Thanks, Mary
And I
Lou.
think that kind of model to learn together could be replicated in the business community. So we
Absolutely.
could have several small restaurants, for example, learn from one another. What have you done in your kitchen to
Right.
handle this? How are you going to handle any customers you have in your restaurant at the time?
Mhm.
What's your plan to do this? And, the various obstacles that they might identify commonly and learn to handle them together.
And I
Um,
think the pandemic, we've seen that a lot with people sharing how they dealt with things. So, I mean, we already have a bit of a track record, because I think most businesses tend to get so focused and are already so busy. I mean, there's so much on everyone's plates. But I think with the pandemic, we've just seen a lot more sharing of, this is what I did, this is how we dealt with it, and people sharing their ideas, that I think has made a pretty big difference with many of the organizations that were hardest hit, and trying to, how do we navigate opening a restaurant back up? So we already have that kind of that experience. I just think it'd be great to see us expanding on it.
So their first step might be to think, who have I relied on over the last year and a half or whatever, who has
Right.
helped me? And just simply making that phone call or having a coffee together and saying, I know we've helped one another in the last little while. Should we have a disaster, we can count on doing that again, right? And how could we do that? And yeah, I could see that happening. That might be a
Absolutely.
great first step, a great first step.
Building those relationships is really important, because we tend to, I just generally, we tend to all think we're on our own. We're on our own. And the thing is that it's really about, yes, we are on our own in some ways, but the thing is that we can build community, and in that we can help each other out, whether it's lessons learned, whether it's expertise, whether it's someone bringing something to you, or bringing other resources. I mean, there are a lot of ways that we can help one another out, but it just really starts with the conversation. And most people are a little tentative about asking for help when something happens, but they're less likely they're, I guess, more comfortable to talk about preparedness in advance. So why not take full advantage and just say, what about this? How about that? I mean, I've seen a lot of competing businesses work together, like banks, competing banks. Or
Yes.
what they did is they worked out a relationship where if one of them got hit by a disaster, the other one would co-locate. So during the day, the one bank would write their checks and do their business, and at night, the other one would come in, use the same equipment, and run their checks writing system. Great. I mean, again, competing banks, but yet when we're all in this together, the whole community is helped when businesses are still operating.
Well, that's a great idea. Ines, do you see any additional questions?
No other questions? This is your last chance if you had one.
Well, not seeing any, I'm going to go ahead and just thank you, Ines, from the bottoms of our hearts. We're really, really grateful for your presentation today and for just giving us these sparks of new ideas that we can really dig into and make our business community really resilient. And we know that our community depends on our businesses to exist. So we're grateful for your presentation today and for all your support. We're also thankful for all the people who have attended today. I hope you've learned some new ideas, captured some great links, and we'll have some time set aside to go online and find some of the tools that you can use going forward. I also want to let you know you're going to receive a survey sent to you post this event today. Please fill it out. We would love to know feedback on this event, but also some any ideas that you might have on what we might do for you going forward to help your businesses be successful in the way of preparedness, in the way of handling any disasters that might come across. We're willing to work with you. We're willing to provide information to you. We're grateful for Katie Stice and the Chamber of Commerce and our connection with them. Katie's now an advisor to our commission. So all those things really work together, as Ines said, to build our community. And we realize how important that is to us all. So thank you very much again for your attendance today. And good luck with your preparation, and let us know how we can help. We're here for you. So thank you again and have a wonderful day. Get to work. That's what I'm going to do. Thanks. Be safe, everyone.
Thanks, Mary Lou.
Thanks, Ines. Bye-bye.